Okay, we want to talk today about why our friends are actually good for our kids, too.
Yeah, let's get into that. Hey everybody, I'm Nathan Warnock.
I'm Andrew Warnock.
And you've caught us for Family Friday. This is a show that we get to do every Friday where we talk about God's design for raising our children, God's design for how we manage our families, as well as some practical tips to help you along the way as you raise your family.
Yeah. So today we're talking about positive role models. We're talking about how our close friends can actually be really great positive role models for our kids.
No doubt.
So our friends can be really instrumental in our kids' lives. And so we're going to talk all the way through that.
Yeah, and this is not something that we did right necessarily when Jackson was young.
For sure.
Right? I mean, we were not in a great place just generally. You guys know that if you've followed our channel at all, but this is definitely something that the Lord has grown us in, over the years.
Right. And we'll tell you kind of why we've grown in that. And I grew up with some great adults around me as positive role models, and it's been something that we've just recognized in our growing up years was so important, and we want that for our kids.
Yeah, totally.
So, and oftentimes, really, kids look up to the people that they know personally,
That's right.
Not celebrities or things like that. I mean, usually the people that they're really looking up to and really wanting to emulate are people that they know. And so let's surround our kids with those positive role models.
Yeah, and I would even go as far as to say we do our kids a real service when we call their attention away from those sort of national figures and bring some role models into their lives that are tangible and local.
Real.
Because it's really easy for us to get these blown out of proportion ideals about what an athlete is or isn't, what a movie star is or isn't, even what a pastor, maybe a nationally renowned pastor, is or isn't. And if we're not really careful to keep our kids grounded in that, we can set them up for, a real crash when that person, either enters into some sort of moral failure or just turns out to not be the person that they thought they were when they put them on that pedestal. And to give them some tangible role models that they can actually have and build a relationship with.
It's a huge benefit.
It's a huge benefit.
Right. So we're going to talk about the why. Why do we do this?
Yeah.
The how. We're going to talk about some biblical examples, and then just some real life examples for me of how my parents' friends have been super impactful in my life.
Yeah, that's great.
So, first of all, why? Why should we have friends that are role models for our kids? Well, one reason would be to have other adults that your kids can look up to other than mom and dad. Because while mom and dad are great, at some point, most kids start thinking mom and dad are not so great.
That's right.
And so having those people that have already been around for a while, that your kids have a good rapport with, that your kids have started looking up to and spend time around, those people are great to have at those points of life where your kids start thinking mom and dad aren't so great.
Right.
So other adults that your kids can really trust and look up to.
Yeah, they're just always going to be cooler than mom and dad.
Right.
Right? Because they're not the disciplinarians.
Right.
They're not the ones that have to set the boundaries.
They're not seeing the ugly sides of the kids. And they know
That's
that.
right. Yeah, so those people really can have a special place of influence in the life of our kids. And the great part about this is you get to choose those people as the parents.
Yes. And then kind of piggybacking on that, then you have adults that your kids can go to for advice and for help. And that can go into their adult years too, but is, of course, really great as they get to those ages that maybe they aren't wanting to talk to mom and dad about certain things, but they might be willing to talk to a friend of mom and dad's and people who've just been around and been people who've already poured into their lives, and so they can trust, they care about me, and I can trust them, to go to them. So
that's good.
Another why is people that can pour into your kids without obligation. So I think a lot of times kids discount the love of a parent, the advice of a parent, the involvement of a parent, because they are maybe erroneously thinking they have to do this because they're obligated to. They're my parent. They have to love me. They have to give me this compliment. They have to help me. All of those sorts of things. Whereas if they can seek other adults that are interested in, have the kids' best interest at heart, but have no real obligation to help them, and no real obligation to give them that compliment or whatever, they're just doing it because it's true, then that can speak volumes to a child. I mean, there's definitely times in my growing up years that what my parents' friends had to say or what they did meant more than at the time than what if my parents had said or done the same exact thing.
Right.
Just because I felt like they were doing it because they didn't have any obligation to.
Right. Yeah. That's which creates a real opportunity as parents, because again, we get to pick those people.
Right.
So you can put people in that position of influence in your kids' lives that the advice those people are going to give. That it's the same as the advice you would give, but they have, potentially a higher degree of moral authority in your child's life to be able to speak into that.
Yep. So another reason is people that will pray for your kids and help to disciple them.
Yep.
I have feels like billions of examples of time in my life where I know my parents' friends were praying for me because I was going through something really hard. And that could be anytime from when I was a child to an adult and married. And I know those people stepped in, and I knew especially as an adult because they would reach out to me. And I mean, countless hours of prayers from my parents' friends because they loved me and they loved my parents and they wanted the best for me. And my mom even had a prayer partner that was her best friend at the time when I was growing up, and they would spend a lot of hours not even praying about problems that were going on, but just praying into our future.
Yeah.
And what a blessing that has been. I'm sure I'm living out blessings of those prayers from my parents' friends and people that I have had as role models in my life.
Yeah.
So that's a great reason to have friends around you that also are pouring into your kids' lives, because they're going to be praying for them. And what better gift to give a person than to pray for them. And then the last thing I have is just that there are people that are maybe doing life in the same kind of way that you are, and if they're parents, maybe parenting in a similar way, and so your kids can see, oh, there's other weirdos out there who don't let their kids have free reign of technology, or there's other weirdos out there who go to church every Sunday, and you know, kids can see I'm not alone on this island of whatever it is.
Right.
So there's other families out there that are doing life the same way we are, and this is okay.
Yep.
Our kids at this point in their lives are fairly sheltered, so a lot of the kids that they're interacting with they live a lot the same lives that our kids do.
Sure.
But that may not be the case for your kids. And if they're doing the public school thing and doing a lot of extracurricular activities, they may feel like, oh my gosh, my parents are so weird because I'm parented so differently than all these other kids. But if you're surrounding yourself with other families and adults who are like-minded and doing life similarly to you, then your kids might not feel like they're on an island, which is a good thing for kids.
Yeah, that's true.
Those are just some of the whys.
Right.
So for reasons to have good friends who can be placed as role models in your kids' lives.
Right. So I mean, the practical question then is what does this look like? How do we live this out? Just a couple things to think about as you're considering this for your family. The first one is have a circle of close friends that are like-minded to you. We talk about not isolating a lot on this channel, and there's tons of reasons why falling into a pattern of isolation where you're not allowing other people into your life, you're not being transparent, right? I don't necessarily mean even not having other people around, because I believe that that a lot of people can have other people physically in proximity to them, but are still isolating. And the reason for that is because they're not being transparent with those people that are around in their lives. That doesn't mean you have to be friends with every person that you meet. I know for a lot of people, building close, intimate friendships can be really intimidating and difficult, and I understand that, but we do need to be proactive in seeking out those relationships, because these are the people that, one, can sow into your life and your marriage and your walk with the Lord, and you can have fun with, and that you can laugh with, and that you can do life with. But also, those are the people that your kids are going to see you doing life with. And begin to build this idea of moral authority, where it's someone where our kids look at them and go, I trust what they have to say. That's the idea of moral authority. You start building that by having these people in your sphere of influence, and your kids see that. Second thing, when you have identified those people in your lives, then do life with them frequently with your children. This is one thing that I think a lot of people can fail at, where we identify those folks in our lives and we start doing life with them at times when the kids are gone. Or we get a babysitter and we go out with our friends, right? Or we go have our friends over after the kids go to bed. And while some of that certainly is okay,
sure.
We would encourage you, have those people over when your kids are awake, so that they can see how you interact with other adults, and they can hear the conversations that you're talking about and see the way that the way that you're living out your life within your relationships.
So, and the positive side of that is then your kids become friends, and those are probably really positive friendships.
Right.
So, for an example, I grew up with my parents.
Yes.
I grew up with, my parents were friends with 4 or 5 other couples that they were all very close and still are from the time that I was very young. Almost every single Friday night growing up, we would go out to get pizza with that group of friends, and then we would go over to somebody's house. It changed every time. And the kids would go off and play together, and the adults would play cards together. And this was almost every single Friday night. And so my parents and their friends, their relationship, of course, got deeper and deeper every year because they kept doing this week in and week out.
Yeah.
And as kids, our friendships got deeper too because we were playing together week in and week out.
Right.
And then we would go on trips together and camping and all that sort of thing. And so our lives just really meshed together.
Yeah.
And those people are still friends with my parents today. And they're also people that I really look up to.
Right.
Because I've lived life with them.
That's right.
So that's just an example of, consistently doing life together with the kids.
It's great. Another additional layer on top of that is not just to do life with them, but be intentional about having conversations with your friends that involve the kids, your kids and their kids. Having conversations, obviously it depends on the age, right? But even young children, having a conversation with them of, hey, why don't you tell, Joe and Sally and Mommy and I about your day today? And they might share something, and then your friends might jump in with a question. And for little kids, it teaches them about passing the conversation ball back and forth. And it begins to build that moral authority because Joe and Sally care about my life. Right? Even though I know I'm just a little kid, they care to ask me about what's going on and pay attention to that. Yep. Another side of this that I just thought of that I didn't hit on in this, but that's really important is be this friend to other people as well.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when you go over to their house, be intentional about having a conversation with their kids. Hey, how's your life going? How's school going? Tell me about something that you like to do. Take a vested interest in your friends' children, because you might very well be the person that son or daughter comes to when they're trying to figure out, man, I got this tough situation at school, or, got caught up in this drinking thing, or this relationship with this girl, or whatever. You might be the one that they come to, and man, what a great way to serve your friends than to be there as a godly landing spot for their children when they need it.
Yep. Yeah, that's something we could do better at, for sure.
Yeah. So then I would say that I kind of just mentioned this. Be the positive role model for the kids in your life, right? Find ways to reach out and love on them and build a bridge for the future. It's really this idea of being mindful of, one, your own children, and keeping an inventory in your head of, okay, who has influence in my kids' lives? And be honest as a couple about this, because if we're being honest, there may be some people where you go, I need to be cautious about having this person as a person of influence in my kids' lives. And the honest truth, guys, is sometimes that changes. There might be somebody that, man, you've done life with them for a while and you thought, man, this is a great influence on my kids. And then they decide to make a change in their life, and you have to reevaluate that. And these are kind of things we want to be honoring to them, right, and not go to our kids and just trash them. But we may need to make a call as a parent to go, maybe we're still going to hang out with these people, but let's do that out. We'll get a babysitter and we'll go hang out with them, because they, I don't want them to have that position of authority in my kids' lives. I mean, this is part of the intentional part of parenting that we talk about so much, is thinking about who's around my kids, who has influence on them, and are my kids learning things from those people that I want them to learn.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So let's talk about then, where do we see examples of this in the Bible? What does the Bible have to say about this? Well, I'll start out with just talking about Proverbs 13:10 or 13:20. Sorry, that says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." So the Bible chock full of verses and about wisdom, right?
Yeah, particularly in Proverbs.
Yes, but this one in particular stood out to me because it was just saying, walk with the wise and you become wise. It's almost like it rubs off,
Yeah.
But for a companion of fools suffers harm. So be careful who we're choosing to spend time with, because iron sharpens iron. It's natural within us to become who we hang out with.
Yeah.
So walk with people who are wise, and surround your kids with people who are good influences and wise. But let's talk about first Hannah and Samuel and Eli. Tell us a little bit about that and where we can learn about positive role models from that.
Yeah, so if you go in the Old Testament to the book of 1 Samuel, right in the very beginning, you'll see a story of a woman named Hannah. And Hannah was married, and her husband had wanted to have children, and the Lord had just not allowed it to happen in their lives up to that point. And so, as part of what it meant to be Hebrew, you would go once a year to the temple and make a sacrifice for your family and the sins that you had committed over the course of that year. And so when her and her husband would go and make that sacrifice, she took that as an opportunity to pray to the Lord about this issue of the fact that she had not had any children. And so she goes before the Lord, and she made a promise to the Lord that if the Lord blessed her with a child, she would return that child to the service of the Lord. And sure enough, Eli the priest sees her. The Lord gives him a message to tell her, you're going to have a child. And so she, sure enough, a year later, she has a child. And true to her promise to the Lord, once that boy, who she named Samuel, once he was weaned, then she took him to the temple and handed him off to Eli and said, hey, I promised the Lord that if he gave me a child, I would return that child to his service. So here you go.
Amazing.
And Eli, while not necessarily a great example of fatherhood, if you look in the Bible, he was a positive influence in Samuel's life.
Yeah.
He got Samuel focused. I mean, you can just clearly see from the way Samuel grew up that he got Samuel focused on the scripture and what the history of the Jewish people and living the life of a priest as God intended it to be from the Mosaic law, and got really Samuel focused in on what it means to listen to the Lord. I mean, there's a story very early on in Samuel's life where Samuel was very young, and he kept waking up in the night, hearing a voice, hearing his name, and he kept going to Eli, and Eli kept saying to parents, "Tell me if you don't hear this." He kept going to Eli and waking Eli up and saying, "Eli, I heard somebody say my name."
It was Eli, yeah.
And Eli said, "I didn't call your name. Go to bed." Right? And pretty soon, Eli, to his credit, was his mind starts ticking, and he's going, "I wonder if the Lord's trying to get your attention." And so he tells Samuel, if this happens again, simply say, "Lord, it's your servant Samuel. What can I do for you?"
I'm
right?
listening, yeah,
right.
Kind of thing.
And ends up kicking off a very impactful conversation that Samuel has with the Lord. And really, I believe, changed Samuel's whole focus of who God was to this sort of God out here that's doing stuff to a God that's intimately involved with Samuel, which would ultimately be the story of Samuel's life. Yes. I mean, Samuel was probably the single most influential prophet leading into the kings of Israel. I mean, a very impactful time in the Israelite history, and Samuel was at the forefront of that under Eli's sort of influence.
Yeah, so Eli was really the catalyst for Samuel to understand the voice of God.
Right. Yeah. Which one of the things I take away from that story, Eli, if you read about Eli had some serious issues going on with regards to how he parented, right? I mean, it wasn't like a big moral failure thing. It's clear from the way his sons carried out their responsibilities that he did not do a good job of fathering them. So why do I share that? To trash Eli? Well, no. It's because you don't have to be perfect to play a key role in another young person's life. And so, we all have regrets. We all have things that we didn't do right, but you don't have to let that own you. Right? In spite of that, God can use you if you're willing to be available to sow into another young person's life.
Yeah. Okay, and then I'm going to talk about the story of Naomi and Ruth. So in the book of Ruth, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, there's this amazing story. Naomi is a mother to two sons who have married so she has these two daughter-in-laws. Her sons pass away. And so she tells her daughter-in-law, which was the custom at the time, go back to your home. Go back to where you are from to live back with your parents, and then probably be remarried again. But
you're free to go.
You should leave me and be free to go back home.
Yeah.
And one daughter-in-law did, but Ruth said, "No, I'm going to stay with you." And Naomi was an incredible woman of God.
Yeah.
And had a very deep faith in the Lord. And Ruth came from not that type of background. So so Ruth ended up saying to Naomi, "No, wherever you go, I go.
Your people will be my people.
Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." And I believe she saw in Naomi truth. And she wanted to stay with Naomi, and so for whatever that meant, and back in that time, widows, and Naomi was a widow as well, by the way. Widows had a very hard time being taken care of. So men were really the breadwinners. I mean, in the truest term, they were the breadwinners, and without a man, it was very hard to get by.
You're essentially a beggar.
Right.
I mean, that's what your life was.
So Ruth was agreeing to stay with Naomi and be widows together and be beggars.
Right.
And so they ended up traveling to, where did they travel to?
Back to Naomi's home.
Right, I'm trying to remember where that was. Anyway, they traveled back to Naomi's home.
I think it was Detroit,
and
if I remember right.
Not Detroit. And they were begging. They were in the fields, just kind of picking up whatever was left over by the field workers to subsist on. And it ended up that Naomi gave Ruth the advice of her life, and Ruth followed it. That there was a family member, a distant family member of Naomi's in that town, and she told Ruth to go sleep at the end of his bed.
Yeah, there's a number of circumstances leading up to that, but yeah, I mean, it ended up,
and they ended up anyway. It was the advice that really led Ruth to the man that God had set apart for her to be married to at that time, named Boaz. And it was her kinsman redeemer, and so she married Boaz, a very wealthy man, and then they were both taken care of.
Right, and in the process, Boaz really is a picture of Christ in that story. And Ruth is one of only a small handful of women that's identified as being in the line of Christ. Right,
and so we see this great picture of Naomi being a very strong woman of God and trusting in the Lord that the Lord would take care of her. And also telling her daughter-in-laws, don't stick with me, like go back and do, But she was such a great role model in Ruth's life that Ruth said, no, you are my family, and you are the one I want to be with and the one I want to follow, even if that means I'm a beggar. And so Ruth trusted her, and Naomi continued to follow the Lord, and the Lord took care of them.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because what you said earlier I want to highlight, because I think it's right. I think Ruth saw Naomi as the woman Ruth wanted to be. And I mean, that's ultimately, when we talk about an influencer, a role model, that's what we're talking about. Right? I mean, bringing people around your children that your children would look at and say, man, that's the man I want to be. Or that's the woman I want to be.
Right. And because of her decision to follow Naomi, and then which led her to Boaz, she became part of the line of Jesus. So
yeah, that's right. That's right. So as you think about those role models and influencers in your life growing up, share some of the impact.
Right. So like I said, my parents had some really great friends, and still they have the same friends, still do. Great friends in their lives that became really great role models to me. And and I just wanted to give some examples of how that's really impacted my life. So one of them is, people praying for me in times that were some of my hardest times in my life. And that was kind of like I shared earlier. I mean, some of those times were when I was young, and some of those times were as an adult. And I know a lot of them still pray for me, but I've had some really difficult times, and I know a lot of those friends of my parents were so faithful to continuously pray for me. And who knows the impact of that? Who could know? But I know it's great. Right. And so I've experienced that, which is amazing. In fact, one of my mom's friends, the day of my wedding, she planned a shower, but it was a prayer shower. So the day of my wedding, in the morning, a whole bunch of my mom's friends who had walked with me in life and prayed for me a lot, and some family as well, met at Robin's house, and we had breakfast, and then we just prayed. And we prayed over, they all laid hands on and prayed over me and our marriage, and how amazing is that, and they wanted to do that because they were great women and women of God, and people who are great role models in my life. So that's one example. Another one is one of them has walked with us through like counseling sessions when things fell apart in our marriage, and so took time to really walk through the nitty-gritty and the ugly, and try to help heal and help us put that back together. there was an example of my mom. My mom had to have a really major surgery when I was 3 years old, and she had to fly to a different city to have that surgery. And I was 3, and so she was gone for, I think, 2 weeks. And my dad went with her for some of that too. So for a portion of that, I was staying with some of my parents' friends, which is another great reason to have friends, is they can step in and help care for your children when they need it.
That's true.
So I was staying with some of my parents' friends, and one of them, so that was a blessing in and of itself, but one of them found out I was really sad, and she just really dug into it and found out that I thought my mom was never coming back home. And so she was able to walk through that with me.
Wow.
So that was great, and it was, again, somebody that I trusted at 3 years old because I knew her. She had done life with us, and I trusted her to tell that.
Right.
There's an example of one of my mom's friends, Julie. I don't know why, but I had a presentation that I was giving. This was in like 4th grade, and she brought me a new outfit at school that day I was doing that, and I have never forgotten that. And it was just like this. I remember at the time thinking, why would she do that for me? Like, I felt so special that she did that. It was great.
It's cute. It's fun.
There's examples that go on and on. Medical help from one of my parents' doctor friends. I mean, just tons of examples. But one of them too is this book. So when I was graduating high school, my mom asked a bunch of those role models in my life that were their friends to write a letter to me. And I have, you guys, I don't know how many letters there are here, and some of them are from family too. And I just have letters from all those people, and some of these people have passed away.
Yep.
So what a great memorial that I get. But that's amazing. And they were all so willing to write that.
It's a really cool memento.
It is cool. They were all so willing to write that, and they knew me well because they'd walked, through me in life, and I get to hold on to that forever. So
yeah, it's great.
So
really great.
Yeah. And I'll give one last example. So our wedding was in December, and we got married at a church that was doing some sort of Narnia theme
for their
and we did not know that the Narnia scene would still be up the day of our wedding. So we get to
it went up the day of our wedding.
I don't know. We get to the rehearsal, not the day of, but we get to our rehearsal the day before, and the Narnia scene is up, and they just put like black cloths over it. So there were like lumps of black cloths all over the stage.
Silliness.
And the wardrobe was in the background too. The Narnia wardrobe thing.
Yeah, like behind where the officiant would be for the wedding.
It was awful. And the guy who was kind of the guy from the church who was kind of running everything was saying, "Yeah, this is not going away. This is just going to be here." And we had no idea before we showed up for the rehearsal.
You were not happy.
And I was just devastated, and I was just in the back. I'm like, I don't want to make a scene, but I'm devastated, and so I was just kind of in the back of the sanctuary crying. And he ended up saying, "I can't do this.
Yeah,
we have to."
He did.
Right. He was like, "Okay, we got to figure it out." So, anyway, what happened is my parents' friends stepped in and said, "All right, tomorrow, if we can get all this cleared off before the wedding, tomorrow after the wedding, but between the wedding and the reception, we will reset it perfectly. We promise." And so all their friends tons of their friends stepped in to set it back up to Narnia so that we didn't have to get married in Narnia. So it was great. Practical help. And again, just one of those crazy memories that I'll always remember.
Getting married in Narnia.
Yeah. We did not have to get married in Narnia, and our pictures are great. So
that's right.
So all that is to say, hopefully you can see the importance of having great friends in your life that end up being great role models for your kids. Maybe they'll end up being great friends with your kids when they're adults.
Yep.
They can pray for them. I mean, it is such an important role to place into your children's lives.
That's right. So we want to leave you with a couple jumping in points. So you might be listening to this and going, okay, well, how do I jump into this? Then I want to give a couple of suggestions, and you can decide where you're at. So first of all, if you have friends, but you're not being intentional about having them be around your kids or being around their kids, start thinking about maybe just inviting them to bring their family over for dinner. If that's a family that you want to be an influencer on their children and you want to have as a role model for your children, start being intentional occasionally about having them over, having the families together. Yes, it's more work than getting a babysitter and going out to dinner, but it's worth it if this is someone that you want to have influence in your family.
Yeah, and it's easy enough to have a conversation with them too about, we really admire the way you live life, and we want our kids to have other adults in their life that they can look up to.
Exactly.
So we'd like to have you around more and, invest in our kids and vice versa.
That's right. You may be going, I don't really have any friends like that, right? Maybe a lot of, your friends are friends that maybe you had from before you came to an understanding of Christ in your life. Maybe they're just friends where you go, I'm in a different place in my life. They don't have kids. And they're kind of living the single life, and I don't really have anybody like that. To you, I would encourage you to be intentional about finding people that you believe would be a positive role model for your kids, but then you getting a close relationship with them. You might think that having friends that would not be a positive influence on your kid doesn't rub off on you, but it does. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be an effect on who you are, therefore, to your kids by those people that you hang around with. I'm not telling you kick the old friends to the curb. I'm not saying that at all.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying, in addition to some of those relationships, unless the Holy Spirit's telling you, right now, if you're listening to this and you're going, man, I'm thinking of this guy and I just feel like that relationship isn't right down in the pit of my stomach, that's a relationship you probably need to bounce out of. Because that's probably the conviction of the Holy Spirit on your life with regards to that relationship. But for friends that are just, they're not necessarily wholesome Christian folks, but you like hanging out with them, great. If they don't stumble you into sin, you don't stumble them into sin, great. But have some Christian positive influence in your life too that you can then by extension introduce into your kids' lives. And, that may be as simple as finding a Bible-believing church in your area and start attending. Get involved in a small group if you're not involved in a small group, and start meeting some other, godly people in a less intimidating environment than, hey, you want to come over to my house one-on-one, right? So, maybe start there. But more than anything else, don't isolate. Right? Get other people in your life and be intentional about giving your kids exposure to those people. You'll be better off for it. Your kids will be better off for it. And you never know, but that your decision to do that will be an introduction to the person that will someday lead your kids down the path of righteousness or help them avoid the path of destruction. Yeah,
that's great. Well, thanks for joining us today. Hope you have a great weekend. Remember to tune in on Sunday for our live event at 8:30 Central Time.
Yeah.
And then we'll be back on Monday with a new episode.
That's right. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. And remember, God is for your family. Have a great weekend.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.